Hi, and welcome to Moms Who Know. This is your host, Chanel Nielsen, and today we are talking with Melissa McIntosh. Melissa is a mom of 3 cute kids. She studied biology and creative writing in school, and she is a woman of many talents. She likes marine biology, music, exercise, and then she also is a piano teacher. She's an awesome photographer. She's a good mom and a personal friend, so I'm excited to have her on the show today. Melissa, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Good. I'm glad to have you here today. So Melissa, I mentioned, has 3 kids, and those are her 3 biological children. But Melissa has been going through the process of adoption. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is kind of this whole process and what it's been like for her. So people adopt obviously for different reasons, and you guys are able to have kids. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of why you guys decided to go through the whole adoption process?
Yeah, for us, it really was just a feeling that we wanted to, honestly. We did feel like maybe that, was what God wanted for us. And when we had that feeling, we, at first it was kind of, like why? Well, there were a lot of questions that came up, mostly to do with, is it a good idea for us? Because we can have biological children, should we be, quote unquote, taking up a space kind of thing, But as we just kept following those feelings that we wanted to do it, we found so many people who were so supportive, people who had already adopted, who just like grabbed our hands and were like, no, you should do this. It's awesome. And so, yeah, from there, it just really became this solid thing for us that, yes, we do want to do this. And it's just become a total part of our lives now.
That's very cool. I think that one of the things, if people aren't able to have kids or maybe don't want to go through that process and all of their kids are adopted, that's kind of a different structure and like a whole different thing than having some kids who are biological and then some who are adopted. So what kind of barriers and things that, with kind of a blended family, and then other things that have come up as you've worked through this process?
Yeah, so I think a big difference is just that a lot of people, when you call their agency, they're super supportive, but they do tend to kind of say, now, why are you doing this? And
yeah, they question it.
Yeah. But when you explain to them that you felt like you wanted to, and that you really feel like this is how you want to continue to build your family, they are very supportive. I think that, like I said, we were really worried about maybe the reaction of some other people who weren't able to have their own children, and would they be upset that we were doing this?
Almost like you're taking a kid that they could have had, kind of thing.
Right, exactly. And we were worried about that, but I had 2 very sweet friends who said, no, if you want to do this, then don't worry about the feelings of others, for one. And for 2, one of them made this really neat point that, like 2 different birth moms of her children, they wanted their families for very specific reasons. And she said, there might be a birth mom out there who wants your family for very specific reasons. So you're not taking up a space, you're providing, this other, option for a birth mom who maybe didn't know exactly what she was looking for at first, but now she has found it. And, and that made me feel so much better, obviously. And I think that there are barriers though too. Like one thing, cause we did start in private adoption, and now we're switching to foster. So through private adoption, you're allowing the birth mom to choose you. You just have this open profile. She can look, and sometimes the birth father's involved, and they can look and they can see you and your spouse and your children, and you have pictures of your home and all of these things, And there are a lot of birth moms who don't want to place with parents who can have their own children, because they feel like it's not as much of a gift to your family. They would prefer to give to a family that can't have their own.
Right.
But we weren't necessarily hurt by that. We had the possibility with two different birth mothers, two connections that didn't end up going through, but they both told us that they appreciated that we just came into this wanting to adopt. They said it made them feel like we really wanted it, and they liked that their baby would have siblings, right off the bat, which can happen through adopted families, too. But they just, so they weren't opposed to our situation, but some are. So, I think that it kind of balances out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that totally does. And that's an interesting perspective. It's also really interesting you said that it's almost like you have to, like you're selling your family, like you're putting, you know what I mean? Like you have to have a little salesmanship there. Like, look, our family's really great. Do you want to be you want your baby to be part of this family kind of thing? So that's an interesting thing with private adoption that I bet would be kind of a challenge you need to present yourself a certain way, present yourself well so that moms will choose you.
Yes.
It's kind of a hard thing. Okay, so tell us a little, you mentioned that you've had a couple of private adoptions that haven't gone through. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of that process and the whole emotional, I know it's been an emotional thing for you, like up and down of, oh, we're going to have this baby, we're not. Kind of tell us what that looks like.
Yeah, no problem. It is emotional. It's very emotional because there's two sides there's three. There's three sides to every adoption, and it's called the adoption triangle in the adoption world. And we're new to this. So, we're still learning all of the lingo. There's a lot of lingo that's specific just to adoption in the adoption world. But, the adoption triangle is comprised of the adoptive family, the birth family. You often have just birth moms, but sometimes you have both, like I mentioned, and then the adoptee, the baby. So when you walk into this connection, for us, we felt like it was so important right from the beginning to, first of all, just not be judgmental. I mean, if a woman is coming to you because she needs to place a baby, that means that she has to give up her baby. She is going to lose that baby because of something in her life, whether it's her fault or not. And either way, we just felt like there was nothing in us that wanted to make that birth mom feel bad for needing to make that choice. We were just wanting to be there for her and for the baby. And so when you go in with that mindset, you already kind of have your heart open in this really vulnerable way, because that you're working with someone who has some sort of level of dysfunction in their life as far as that they aren't able to keep their baby.
Right.
And that can be varying levels, and that can be for varying reasons. But, opening yourself up when you really don't know this person is hard, and
then it seems like, they're sharing this they're going to tell you why it's not, why they can't keep this baby and kind of the circumstances that led up to that. So they're becoming very vulnerable with you. It seems like this connection that would, you'd be on a deeper level all of a sudden with this birth family.
Exactly. And you really have to have a lot of trust between the two of you, which is hard. Like I said, when you don't really know each other, but you are both working for the best possible life for this baby, that's just one of the most important things you can be talking about in this life. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it's really just vulnerable, and it's vulnerable from the other side. I remember with both of the birth moms that we talked to the first time, she would say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous." And, and we were too. It was like, yeah, us too, but you kind of connect and, and like you said, then you really start to get to know each other's stories. Both of our birth mothers did not realize that our children were biological when we first connected to them. And so on our end, we were a little bit worried about that aspect of, are they not going to want to place with us because of that? Like if they find out that we're able to have more, are they going to want to switch to someone who can't? But both of them, like I said, they were both very, just good about that. They said, oh, okay, that's great. I want my baby to have siblings, and that's wonderful. So they were fine. And then, with both of them, you hear their stories, and they're just heartbreaking stories. You just realize what it has to come to in your life to have to lose a baby, when your life is in a position that you're not able to keep a child who is wanted. I mean, both of our birth moms wanted to keep their babies. And I believe that, they did. But at the time when they connected to us, they felt that they couldn't, Okay. And so when you hear that story, it is heartbreaking. And so you're kind of torn between, you hear their story and you think, wow, it probably really is best that this baby come to our home. And so you immediately start investing in that aspect of it. But at the same time, you hear that heartbreak and that sadness in the birth mom's voice every time you talk to her, about the actual placement plans, or about, when it starts getting real, when it starts getting closer to that due date. Our one birth mom started breaking down crying one day saying, I won't get to see her first birthday. I won't get to see her first steps. And it was really, really sad. And so when our connections fell through, even though we knew that maybe the situations and, the first baby situation was so different than the second baby situation was just a really rough situation. That birth mother was just in a really rough place in life. And it is sad because you feel like, wow, we really, I want to phrase this right. You don't want to arrogantly say we could have provided a better home, but rationally speaking, you do know that that's true. And yet it's not your place to say that. You know what I mean? Because you do know that this mother loves her baby so much, and that's why she changed her mind. That's why she couldn't go through with it. And at some level, it comes down to that ginormous question of, does anyone deserve to lose their baby, really? And so even though we were the second connection went much longer. We'd been connected to her for about 5 months at the time when it fell through. That was a lot of time. We even went to visit her in person, in another state. And it was really emotional. We were so wrapped up in that situation and in believing that this baby was going to come to our home. And we'd even been to a doctor appointment with her. We'd seen the baby, in a sonogram. We'd kind of had the doctor basically say that that the baby needed to be placed for adoption, that the situation was. So when it fell through, there's all of those kind of feelings of confusion, like what did we just leave this baby to,
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, because of the connection we had to our birth mother, it was also like, well, maybe she can do this. Maybe this is what she needs to really pick up her life and to make things better. And we're just not the ones to say. It was supposed to be her choice from the beginning, and it had to be her choice in the end. And so you just kind of have to come to peace with that. You did everything you could to be there for this birth mother, for this baby. And had she chosen to place her baby with you, you would have loved that baby forever and ever. But because she didn't, then you kind of have to say, okay, then now we're on board with your decision and we want to support you. And, we're still here if you ever need us in a different way. So
that kind of just gave me chills. Like, that's really cool because, even though it didn't work out, now you have this connection to this baby, and your thoughts and your prayers and everything go out, and this baby has just this one more, well, two more, you and your husband, people in the universe just rooting for him, her, I don't know if it's boy or girl. Her, just rooting for her, just hoping, and praying and putting your energy towards hoping that everything will be okay. And so even if nothing else, there's that positive, that hope, and that wish for this child to turn out okay and for everything to go okay. But that is such a loss, for the family. You talked about how these moms have to choose to give up their baby and how that would be so hard for them. But then when obviously you're not pregnant, but it's the same anticipation as if you were pregnant, because you're anticipating this baby coming to your family. And when that doesn't happen, it's a similar loss, just like, nothing. We're not having this baby.
Even when I gave away some of the clothes and blankets that I had bought specifically, for that baby, we got them for her for Christmas so that she would have a couple gifts opened. And we even took a video of our kids opening those gifts and sent it to the birth mom, to show her that we were thinking of the baby. And I just gave those away recently. And there's just a little bit of not a little bit, there's a mourning period to that. And I've had miscarriages before, and it felt very similar in emotion to that type of feeling, that lost anticipation, that, just kind of, you still worry too, about the baby. But it is a different relationship now. And we definitely have the birth mom and baby in our prayers that, that they'll be okay. And that if nothing else, hopefully they got a glimpse of what a happy family looks like. And that's what they can work towards.
Yeah. Together. And you hope that was, an example and a helpful thing for them to know that someone else is out there rooting for them. So let's go ahead and change gears a little bit here and talk about what you're doing now. So you've had these two experiences where you've had these moms choose your family and then have it not pan out. And now you guys are switching to foster care. And for me, just thinking it through, and you'll have to tell me, how you guys are doing it, but I've seen foster care where, you have this baby and they might have been taken from a tough situation, but they may be going back to it if their parents get it together. And so that seems like an emotional issue of a whole different level.
Yeah.
So is that kind of how it will be for you guys? You'll foster, and then if it works out, you could end up adopting.
Yeah, there are different ways to foster. So I believe you always go through an agency. I am not sure if you can go straight through the county or not, to be honest, but I've talked to a few people and they suggested going through an agency, and I just didn't look past that. I just looked for the agency we wanted to use after that. So if you go through an agency, you can tell them that you only want to foster to adopt, which means that you only want a low risk situation. You only want to accept a baby or whatever ages you're looking for, that the rights have already been terminated or are for sure going to be terminated soon. That, a judge has said, no, these parents cannot get their child or baby back, and so therefore rights will be terminated in the state. So you can specify to your agency that that's what you want to do. We decided that because we still have young children and our youngest is only 2.5, we still only wanted to foster, newborn to a year old, just because it would be easiest for our family, dynamics at the moment.
Yes, babies usually, people are usually added to your family from the younger age, not all of a sudden have an older sibling. So yes, that makes sense.
Exactly. Right. And because our oldest is still so young too, it just made sense. And so, when we decided to switch to foster, one reason that we did, it decided like hours after our second connection fell through private, because the thought of going back to a waiting pool of families through private adoption and just kind of sitting there waiting all over again, and then possibly having another failed connection when we'd already set up the crib. We'd already been pulling out newborn clothes and getting ready and pulling out our, baby equipment, and just everything's ready, and our sweet daughter, she definitely understood what was going on. I mean, at least that there was a baby who we might adopt. And then when we had to tell her that it wasn't going to happen, the little tears came into her eyes. And then she said, "It's okay, Mommy. We'll try 20 times. We'll try 20 times. Aww. And then if it doesn't work, we'll stop. Okay."
That's so sweet.
It was really sweet. And in my head, I was like, oh gosh, 20 sounds like a lot. But, what that experience did teach us was that, for one, we don't need to worry too much about our daughter. She understands, but she's way more resilient than we are.
Yes. And she's not having this emotional connection as much. It's probably still an idea to her. We're going to have a baby, but she's not attached to a specific baby, a specific birth family.
Exactly. We didn't, involve her too much at that level for that reason. So when we decided to switch to foster, it was because all of a sudden we realized that basically that's kind of what we had just experienced. We had just experienced that feeling of, this situation for this baby is really not great, but we now have to switch our minds to just supporting this birth mother. And so with foster, it's going to basically be the same thing. We are willing to take high risk foster situations. And with babies, that's more likely what you get. They end up being taken away for, whatever reason it is that the situation isn't stable at the moment. But then there's a social worker on the other side trying to help the biological family to get their life in order to bring this baby back home. And so when you're dealing with especially newborns, and then the agency told us up to 6 months especially, it's very rare that a judge is just going to terminate those rights. They're most likely going to try to reunify that baby with the family. And so we said that we were willing to take in these high risk foster babies, and high risk just means that you're most likely not going to get to adopt them. And we decided that because for us, what was really the difference was, if we go back into a waiting pool of families, we're sitting here all ready for a baby. And, we're so blessed to have these 3 children we already have to snuggle and love on and teach and, do all those things we were hoping to do. And then we have the ability to have a baby in our home right now. So why wait when we could just snuggle a baby who needs us maybe for only a couple weeks, or maybe for only a couple months, or maybe longer. But then if it did ever turn into an adoption, it would still end in the same place we were hoping for. But in the meanwhile, we would have had this chance to provide love to maybe several different babies, and also even maybe have the chance to support these biological families. Most of the time you facilitate visits between the baby and the family. And, I've only read through, other people's experiences, but oftentimes you end up developing a bond with that biological family, and you can end up being someone that they turn to later on, for questions or advice, or just that they just come back to you for visits because they know that their baby loves you, So we just felt like it just seemed to make so much more sense to get to actually do something rather than wait. And since we knew we could survive the heartache, we did once, we decided that we're ready, I guess is maybe the word for it. We're ready to put ourselves in that position to maybe see some sad things and to maybe, have our hearts broken here and there. But it just seems to feel better than waiting around.
That's so awesome. So I didn't know that last little part of your story, and that I admire you guys so much for doing that and being willing, because like you said, I mean, they do need a place to go, and it takes people like you and your husband who are willing to give these little babies a place to go. And, the babies only have something to gain. They will only be better off for being in a loving, caring environment. and they're not going to feel that sadness if they end up, not with you forever. But you are willing to put yourself out there and to, like you said, experience that heartbreak just to give this baby what he or she needs. So I think that is awesome. We are about out of time, but any last thoughts on people who are considering this process of adoption or fostering, or kind of thinking that they might want to grow their family that way? Any thoughts that you'd share with someone who's about to go on this journey?
Yeah, I think when you start out, whether it is because, this is your option for building a family, if it's because of infertility, and so this is the way that you can do it, or whether it's because you want to. Either way, when you start out, it is so overwhelming. Just the options between private and foster, and then choosing an agency. When we first got started, I almost gave up just trying to choose an agency because it was so difficult to weed through, which agencies are legitimate even. I mean, in the private sector, there are agencies that are not good agencies at all, and there are really corrupt agencies. And so then you're scared, to choose the wrong one. And then, in the foster system, I think that most of us are very scared about that thought of taking on these high risk situations and of losing children over and over again, So I think that for me, what happened though, was that when I did start to get help, I started getting on a bunch of adoption forums and talking to a bunch of people. And that was almost as hard as, doing an internet search and just trying to weed through agencies. Like, there's just too many voices that can come through, and it gets confusing. So I would suggest to people, pick a couple friends that that have adopted, or if you don't know anyone who has adopted, maybe go on one or two adoption forums and make sure that you like them. If you keep seeing post after post that isn't helpful and that's causing you anxiety, because maybe what they're saying is causing you to be worried, then maybe that's not the adoption forum for you. But do find a couple places of help. And I would say, once you do choose an agency, whether it's for foster or for adoption, then really just utilize their help. That's why they're there, and just sometimes just don't get confused by all the voices out there, kind of stick to your path and stick to what you are feeling is right. And you really do have to just trust those feelings, because everyone's adoption journey is going to look so different, but it doesn't mean that one was right and one was wrong, But I think sometimes when you start getting that feeling that, gosh, what these people say just doesn't make sense, well, then maybe that's because they're not really lining up with what your journey is supposed to look like, So yeah, I would just say, try to find one or two sources that just really help to validate what you're going through and help you to kind of just have a clear focus. And once you find those sources, just stick to that, and then stick together as a couple. Just be open and honest with each other. It takes immense communication, because, my husband and I, we were both just feeling such heavy emotions sometimes, to the point where we were kind of falling apart every once in a while, but we had to do it together. If we were falling apart separately, then that would have been not good for our marriage, but we cried together and we talked together, and that actually in the end has brought us together more. So just stay close together as a couple. Don't let an agency or a friend or anyone else get in the way of you as a couple. Like, don't use them as your primary communication. It should be your spouse. You guys really have to be on board together with this journey, because it is emotional and it can be tough, but it's also really wonderful and beautiful in many ways.
Very cool. It's been It's been cool to see this, you guys go through this process, and you've learned a ton already. And I think that it's all leading you to where you're supposed to be. So I look forward to kind of hearing more about what goes on in your family and meeting these little, hopefully this one or maybe more little baby who joined your family. Thank you so much for being on with us today. I think that it's been a good conversation and we've learned a lot. And thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you next time. Bye.